Hello. Welcome back to the Space School, otherwise known as PBSW, your favorite hangout place, and today we're back with another Star Wars story. Today we're going to see what would have happened had the Master of the Order, Mace Windu himself, trained Obi-Wan Kenobi. Would Windu and Kenobi, as Master and Apprentice, significantly change anything, or would the galaxy continue down the same dark path? Before we begin this video, let's smash that like button, try and shoot for 2,000 likes in the first 24 hours, and I release What If Luke Turned Vader to the Light Side Before Facing Sidious. This is a video you definitely don't want to miss. Also, we're going to 50,000 subscribers, so join the Space School and be part of our incredible journey here together. If you have ideas for videos, let me know down below. I do read all the comments, but I don't do crossovers and last thing. If you want to support the channel, check out the Patreon, Twitch, and community Discord. Special shout out to George Story, Benjamin Wells, Gort, Chancellor Lauren Sanders for being Grand Tier supporters, and Jay Hoffman, Icy Raptor, War Pigman 308 as Master Tier supporters on our Patreon. Thank you all for supporting the channel. You guys are helping fund massive projects in the near future. Also, if you want to win a free slideshow collectible, watch the end of the video and I will tell you how. Our story begins in 45 BBY. Young Obi-Wan Kenobi was a rambunctious little youngling. As he approached the age of becoming a Jedi Padawan, it was more and more apparent that not many masters wanted to take him as their apprentice. Obi-Wan, as a youngling, was renowned for a couple of things. He was a rule breaker, always finding himself in trouble for creating issues for himself, or just disobeying orders. More than that, Obi-Wan was weak in the Force. It could be assumed that he was a late bloomer, but as of right now, that was unknown. Obi-Wan just happened to be one of those students that wouldn't find himself into his later years. For Master Yoda, he was struggling with who to put this young Jedi with. He knew that a Jedi Master for Obi-Wan would need to have an unorthodox method of teaching. There were a few Jedi that came to mind. Most notably were Jedi Masters Dooku and Qui-Gon Jinn. They both had very unorthodox methods of teaching. Dooku might be better fit for Kenobi than Jinn, just because Dooku had had more experience as a Jedi Master, though there was a slight fear that Dooku or Jinn might be a bad fit for Kenobi, because of his unorthodox behavior himself. There was also one thing: Dooku was Yoda's last student, and Jinn was Dooku's student, so there might be a degree of bias coming from the Grand Master if he assigned one of them to Kenobi. Yoda sat quietly inside of the Jedi Council chambers, thinking about maybe there might be a better Jedi to teach Kenobi. Of course he could do it himself, but Dooku was meant to be his final student. Yoda looked around the room, and he looked at all the incredible talent he had surrounding him. Some of the most talented Jedi the Order had ever seen were on this High Council during his tenure as Grand Master. Yaddle might be a good choice, but she didn't seem like she wanted to teach Obi-Wan. There was always Even Peel, who was strict, but that might not mix well with Obi-Wan. Yoda looked around and looked at another Jedi Master who sat 2 seats away from him. Plo Koon might be a good choice for Kenobi. He was one of the most renowned Jedi the Order had ever seen in generations. A Keldor Jedi Master Plo Koon might be the best choice to ask Obi-Wan to be trained by. As Yoda looked at Plo Koon during this council session, not listening to what anyone was really talking about, his vision blurred on Plo Koon as he looked at the Master of the Order. Yoda looked at Master Windu, the 27-year-old Jedi. Yoda thought momentarily. He knew the council was about to accept his first and only student to the Jedi Council. Depa Billaba was an impressive Jedi herself, just like her master. Yoda knew all about her and his story very well. Mace had saved Depa and then trained her into becoming a Jedi Knight. Even more than that, Mace Windu was the youngest member to ever be accepted to the Jedi Council, let alone become Master of the Order himself. He was incredibly wise, and while he wasn't exactly to the age and experience of Plo Koon, Yaddle, Even Peel, Opal Rancis, or even Master Yoda himself, he might be a great choice for teaching a rambunctious Padawan such as Obi-Wan. Yoda truly cared about every Jedi within the Order, and in an order of 10,000 members, it was hard to keep track of them all. It wasn't uncommon for there to be a rambunctious youngling, but Yoda always stepped in to assure that the particular student had a healthy outlet to be taught from. If the student had a good teacher, then he or she wouldn't have to worry about it, and so he always tried to assign the best teacher to a student that he could, especially the rambunctious ones that most masters didn't want. As the council session eventually ended, Windu waited behind. He knew that Master Yoda wanted to talk to him. There was no verbal communication between the two, he could just feel it. Mace waited until the council proceeded out of the chambers, as he asked the Grand Master what he wanted to talk to him about. Yoda expressed to him that there was a youngling that he would like him to take as a pupil. Mace thought momentarily. He hadn't intended on taking a new student for a while, but he listened. Yoda told Mace that the boy was rambunctious and he had struggles with the Force itself. The young Jedi had struggles passing the youngling trials. Yoda assumed the boy could be a late bloomer. Mace pondered for a moment, and then asked for the boy's name, assuming he may know the boy by reputation. Yoda said the boy's name was Obi-Wan Kenobi. Mace put his hand on his chin as he thought. He recognized the name. Jedi Master Sindralik talked about Obi-Wan and his ability to wield a lightsaber, or lack thereof. Master Sindralik said that despite Obi-Wan's inability to use the Force proficiently, he was dedicated to being a duelist. Mace told Yoda that he would think about this matter and introduce himself to the boy to get a better perception of his thoughts. Mace really didn't want to take on a rambunctious student, especially because Depa was such a great student to have initially. If Obi-Wan seemed like he had the drive and the dedication to be a great Jedi, then Mace would take him on. If not, Windu suggested that Dooku would be a better fit. Mace Windu and Dooku were good friends, and he saw what Dooku was able to do for Qui-Gon Jinn, so it was only a matter of time before Windu decided if he would take on Kenobi or not. After a couple of hours, Mace would find himself down in the younglings area, trying to find this particular youngling. Mace would ask the instructor to speak to Obi-Wan. The instructor assumed that Obi-Wan was being removed from the Order, and when Obi-Wan was called upon to talk to Master Windu, he assumed that he would be removed from the Order as well. Obi-Wan held himself together, trying to show that he wasn't worried about being removed from the Order. After all, he was 13, and he had no life to go to outside of the Order. He had little memories of his family, but he wouldn't need to worry about that as Windu asked the young boy what he wanted to do as a Jedi. Obi-Wan thought for a moment. He said he wanted to be the best version of himself that he could be for the people of the galaxy. Windu was impressed with this very slight answer, but then asked why Obi-Wan was known for breaking the rules. Obi-Wan expressed that the rules didn't always make sense. He said he broke the rules because he just wanted to work harder. Mace and Yoda hadn't realized that while Kenobi wasn't the best student, he just wanted to be better as a Jedi himself. Some of his rule-breaking habits had nothing to do with respect for the rules, and more to his self-respect and dedication to becoming a better Jedi. Windu was a little confused as Kenobi continued explaining that he just wanted to be better. He never wanted to be a failure. If that meant he had to break the rules and sneak into the training halls when there was no one around, then he would. Mace then thanked Kenobi for his time and wished him his luck in the Padawan selection process, as Obi-Wan smiled and bowed to him as he left. Windu then spoke to the instructors. He wanted to hear the other side of the story. The instructors explained it in a way that Kenobi was out and about doing things that he shouldn't have been doing when there was no one around to advise him or to watch him. They also expressed that there were some times that he was caught with his lightsaber training outside of the hours that he was allowed to be training with the lightsaber. He was also doing all of this without supervision or without permission. Mace then asked what his markings were, and the teacher said he was average. He was a quiet student and really friendly. Mace would then thank the instructors and return to his own quarters. Windu had to think about his decision. He felt favorable to teaching Obi-Wan. Chances he could bring Obi-Wan to the level he wanted to be at by the time Obi-Wan was 20 were very high, though Mace wasn't particularly excited to take on a new student just yet. While Depa was a great student, he wanted to enjoy some time on the High Council without having to be a teacher, while simultaneously trying to pull the Jedi away from the Senate. With a student, he would have to take time away from doing that to teach this student and show them the ways of the Force. As the next couple days passed, as it became time for the Jedi Masters to select their Padawans. At first, the Padawans were lined up, as they each awaited a Jedi Master or a Jedi Knight to select them to become their Padawan. There were several known Jedi Masters out and about selecting their first Jedi Padawans. Next to Obi-Wan was a young Targuta girl. She was 2 years older than Obi-Wan, her name being Shakti. Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn began walking towards the Padawans and walked up to Obi-Wan, and then stepped over and asked Shakti to be his apprentice. She of course agreed with the acquisition and the proposition. It wouldn't be long, but eventually the Master of the Order showed up. Mace Windu stood and requested that Obi-Wan Kenobi become his apprentice. The boy stepped forward. There was a certain amount of joy drawn across his face. He hadn't expected Mace to come back to take him on. Mace would immediately take Obi-Wan away from the area into a training closed studio. Mace had a lot to unpack about Kenobi. In the previous couple days, he had done research about the young Jedi, trying to figure out everything he could about the boy. Mace didn't necessarily have abstract thinking towards training. It was relatively straightforward, but Mace did have the talent for making those around him better. For being 27, Windu was one of the greatest Jedi seen in generations, and while he was deeply entrenched with the Jedi Code, he had his own methods for obtaining his own abilities and for teaching them as well. Windu used several of his own powers to embolden himself. The question was for Kenobi, and if he would make it. It was very obvious at a young age that he either wouldn't become a Jedi or he would be a late bloomer. His Force abilities were relatively weak, and it was noticeable in most of his classes, especially when one of his classmates was Shaak Ti. Obi-Wan and Mace set themselves up inside of the training room as Mace asked Kenobi to step forward and ignite his lightsaber. At this point, Obi-Wan was a proficient user in Form 1. Of course, he was struggling with everything regarding the Force and even his own confidence wielding a lightsaber, but Obi-Wan expressed that he was seeking out to get better. For Obi-Wan, it was his time to choose a lightsaber form that he would call his own. Most Padawans would adopt the lightsaber form that their Jedi Master used, but there was one issue. Mace Windu used Form 7, which was a very hard and uncanny lightsaber form for a Jedi to use. Form 7 was usually used by a Sith because of its function towards aggression and the darkness, but Form 7 was also adopted by the ever-so-peaceful Jedi Master Deppa, which was Mace's former student. So it didn't have to be uncommon or even uncanny for Obi-Wan to adopt this either. Mace let Obi-Wan show him his skill in Form 1 with the training droids. Obi-Wan would show off in his normal practice, nothing too special from a young Jedi. Mace would then ask Kenobi to spar with him. Kenobi thought that Mace might try and take it easy on him like Master Sindralik normally would, but that would be far from the truth. As Mace understood, being uncomfortable was where the most growth happened, and so he wouldn't take it easy on his apprentice. For a Jedi who struggled with Form 1, it would be a struggle to face off against the Masters of the Order. Mace also made sure that Obi-Wan wasn't hard on himself either, especially because there was no reason to fret about losing one-on-one to one of the few Jedi in the entire Order who used the aggressive form as Form 7. Obi-Wan would have to learn naturally to lean into the Force if he wanted to stay on his feet for more than 3 blows from his Jedi Master. Kenobi would also have to be a very quick learner, because Mace was ready to work, and Kenobi had to be as well. As the two duelists readied themselves for the spar, Kenobi took the basic form as Windu steadied himself in his aggressive form. While Windu understood why Sindralik was easy on his students, Windu didn't act like that, and he never would be like that. He believed and empowered the students to become almost arrogant of themselves. So, Mace, even though he knew of how humble Kenobi was, would bring him down another level, showing him that there was much he needed to learn about the Force, and excite the eager young mind of his student into becoming more than he could achieve. After hours of training, Obi-Wan was on the floor again, knocked down by his master. Windu kept enforcing Obi-Wan's motivation, because no matter how many times Obi-Wan was put down, he always got back up to his feet, readying himself for the next round of lightsaber combat. The best part about this training is that after copious rounds of dueling with Mace Windu, he was beginning to pick up on Form 7. It was becoming easier to learn once it was used against you, because for Obi-Wan he had to learn how to defend against it. While Mace wasn't going full speed, he was going hard enough to make Obi-Wan feel like he was fighting for his life. The intention behind every strike made by Windu put Obi-Wan into a more defensive stance and a more defensive mindset, though this did not stop Obi-Wan from turning his defense on Mace as he pushed back his master, only to resort back to defense when Mace used his lightsaber and turned the duel back around on him. Mace and Obi-Wan would train like this for the first week of their master and apprentice bond. Their relationship was just beginning, but it was off to a good start. After the first week of essentially Mace beating up on Obi-Wan, he began to teach his student a few different lightsaber forms, the basics of which would be essential for him to master Form 7. Just like anything, Obi-Wan needed to learn the basics before he could get to the fun part, where he would be able to use Form 7. Until then, Mace would start teaching Obi-Wan the ways of Form 2. There was a specific reason for this. Windu, while using an extremely aggressive lightsaber form, was light on his feet and delicate in his blows, much like his friend Master Dooku. So teaching Obi-Wan how to be delicate on his feet and light and precise with his strikes would be key to assisting Kenobi with his training towards Form 7. As weeks turned into months, Obi-Wan would begin to rapidly excel in his training. It wasn't magic, or Mace doing anything special, it was all coming from Kenobi. There was so much more within the Jedi Padawan that was completely untapped. And once both Mace and Obi-Wan began trusting that Force ability within Obi-Wan, and trusting that the Force within Kenobi was there, his power would grow exponentially. Mace and Kenobi would move from Form 2 to Form 4 to focus on more acrobatic forms of lightsaber combat. Ataro, being Form 4, was great for open spaces, and it would be a great stepping stone for Obi-Wan to get closer and closer to Form 7. Mace would have been able to use Form 3 as a training method, but it was too defensive for someone trying to make his way to Form 7. Form 3 would have been a bit of a slowdown for Obi-Wan, because of its focus on defense rather than offense. They would go back to it eventually, but for now, Mace and Obi-Wan would bond very tightly over their sparring sessions. Although Obi-Wan and Mace were so focused on lightsaber combat, it didn't mean that Mace wasn't teaching Obi-Wan about the Force. He was just doing it as a means that took Kenobi's focus off the Force. In other words, Mace Windu was teaching Obi-Wan how to use the Force proficiently, without specifically highlighting the fact that he was teaching Obi-Wan how to use the Force that well. Training would progressively get harder and harder as well. As Kenobi grew in his combat style, Mace would challenge him more and more. Why wouldn't he? There was no reason to hold back on Kenobi, especially because what Mace was doing seemed to be working. There was a piece of Obi-Wan that was being unlocked by Windu, pushing him harder than anyone ever had. It wasn't impatience or belligerence from Windu, but it was his belief in Kenobi's ability to grow beyond what he thought he could achieve. Weeks turned into months as the two Jedi moved from Form 4 into Form 5. The difficult part of transitioning through lightsaber forms so fast is that once Kenobi got good with one, he essentially had to start over. This kept Obi-Wan focused on moving forward, and it also kept him determined to do better than he did in the previous lightsaber form. Getting to a sturdy level within a lightsaber form may take longer in some than in others, but Mace didn't care. As soon as Kenobi was comfortable using one form, he would change into the next. Without having left the Jedi Temple in the first 4 months of training, Obi-Wan was the only student from his class that didn't get to venture outside the temple itself. Windu intended on this though. The temple was a controlled environment. It wouldn't be long until he introduced Kenobi to different environments, but Master and Apprentice became really tight-knit. There was no other Master and Apprentice bond from Kenobi's class that was as close as Windu and Obi-Wan were. After their training of Form 5, for a little more than over a week, Obi-Wan was moved immediately into Form 6. Niman was a difficult form, but Mace believed that Kenobi was ready to take it on, especially because of how quick Obi-Wan picked up on Form 5. This training would be very easy for Obi-Wan. Form 6 was a combination of other lightsaber forms, and while Obi-Wan certainly was far from mastering all the other forms, he did have the basics down, and once you understood the basics of a lightsaber form, it could be very easily just to capitalize off of what you learned. Obi-Wan at this point in his training wasn't on his back all the time. He was holding his own against his master. Obi-Wan began to capitalize off of what his teacher taught him, and he would be able to match with Mace Windu. That was until Mace took his fighting up to another level, pushing Obi-Wan harder than he had ever done so before. The pain of sparring with Windu is that you never knew how powerful he really was. He kept it hidden until it was unveiled by him. Mace and Obi-Wan pushed harder and harder as they tried to achieve the goal of being comfortable with Form 6. That didn't take longer than a week. Mace's continuous perpetuation of hard work and difficult training allowed Kenobi to embolden his powers. As far away as he was from his true potential, he realized that even he himself had the opportunity to achieve so much more than he had previously believed. Obi-Wan, though being beat every single day in every single duel against his master, became exceedingly more confident in himself and his ability to trust the Force. This all worked into Mace's favor, as after the first 6 months of training inside the Jedi Temple ended, at this point, Obi-Wan was beginning his training in Form 7. With the basics of every lightsaber form other than Form 3, Mace had the intentions of returning to that, but for now, he would get Obi-Wan outside the Jedi Temple. Mace wanted to get Obi-Wan into the atmosphere of interaction with politicians, diplomats, resolving disputes, and everything in between all of those. Trips across the galaxy would begin for the young Jedi Master and Apprentice as they faced down different scenarios that they were faced with. Obi-Wan was a natural diplomat, and Mace caught on to this early on into his training. Mace and Obi-Wan would become a common duo to be seen representing the Jedi Order. The continuous success on missions proved to everyone that the two of them being put together was a fantastic idea. Obi-Wan made his master very proud, and he strived to continuously make Windu proud. While the two of them were out and about across the galaxy, Obi-Wan, through Windu's training, would be able to explore new aspects of the Force that he may have not ever discovered otherwise. As Obi-Wan's first full year under Windu turned into 6 years, the young Jedi Padawan was ready for the trials. He was 18 at this point. As a formidable user of Form 7, Obi-Wan also enhanced his basic understandings of Form 2, 3, and 5. Obi-Wan over the years had become an overachiever. Not that Mace tried to stop him from doing so or anything. Mace and Obi-Wan were as tight as master and apprentice could be, and with Kenobi in agreement with everything that Mace believed in, the two rarely ever butted heads. With master and apprentice getting along really healthily, there was no reason to believe that Obi-Wan would struggle in his trials. The truth was that Mace wanted Obi-Wan to take his trials when he was 16. Mace proved that Obi-Wan was a late bloomer, and when he bloomed, he lit up like the sun in the sky. Obi-Wan was a part of the most powerful Jedi in the Order of 10,000. While he was still young, it proved that he would be the perfect Jedi to take his own journey within the Force, as a knight in the Order. Though Kenobi opted to stay with his master for another 2 more years, because he believed that Mace could show more, and that was true. There happened to be a mission during the last 2 years that emboldened Kenobi, and he realized that what he could truly achieve if he continued pushing himself. It was an event where Windu and Kenobi were being pinned down by a pirate gang that had ambushed them. Obi-Wan and Mace needed a plan to get out of there alive, and during which time Obi-Wan lifted several rocks and boulders around the two of them and destroyed every single pirate vessel and knocked out most, if not every single pirate that was shooting at them. Windu was so impressed with his student. It was at that moment that Windu realized that Obi-Wan had come to know himself and in his own power within the Force. Kenobi passed the trials with flying colors at the age of 18. The year was 38 BBY. Obi-Wan was very happy to be a Jedi Knight, and very proud of himself for the progress he made in the 6 years since becoming Mace's student. Mace expressed that when the time came for Obi-Wan to take a student, he should take it. Mace foresaw that Obi-Wan would become a very wise Jedi Master, and with that wise presence, there was also a chance that much like Deppa, who was now a Jedi Council member, Obi-Wan too would become welcomed into the Jedi Council. During these years of training, Obi-Wan beat Windu a total of 5 times in combat. But it was even more apparent that when Mace's teaching had a long-lasting effect on Kenobi, Kenobi learned how to use Shatterpoint. While Obi-Wan was younger than his master, there was a good chance that he'd be very similar in his power to Windu by the time he was Windu's age. Pomp and circumstance would end for Obi-Wan, as he was immediately sent out on his first mission as a Jedi Knight. Adopting the nickname of the Negotiator, Obi-Wan was sent down into the Outer Rim to negotiate a deal between 2 warring factions on Ryloth. It wouldn't take long for Obi-Wan to get out there. At this point, he wasn't sporting a stylish beard, but as a young 18-year-old, he didn't expect a full beard to grow in all too soon. Obi-Wan was inspired to grow a beard by one of his master's good friends, and someone Obi-Wan himself became very close to, that being Master Dooku. Regardless, Obi-Wan's Jedi starfighter pulled out of hyperspace over Ryloth. The Jedi Knight looked down and saw the planet Ryloth as he pulled his starfighter out of the hyperspace ring and flew it down to the surface of the planet. He landed down near the capital city where there was young men in disagreement with a city official. The official's name was Cham Syndulla. He was a very young man, but he was also talking to some other young men. It wasn't Syndulla had done anything wrong, but it was a senator of Ryloth. The planet had a long history of senators being greedy and taking advantage of the core lifestyle while leaving their planet out to dry, literally. While there was a young senator by the name of On Frita, who was running against the current senator, the election wouldn't conclude for about another year. Cham Syndulla was one of the city council members, and he was slowly rising in popularity, but people saw him as a natural leader, especially when he was rising in the Syndulla clan. Cham expressed that he wasn't responsible for the actions of the current senator, and that he was just trying to do damage control, especially since the senator had technically more power in this scenario. Syndulla was literally just the messenger. Syndulla was a spokesperson for Ryloth, and Obi-Wan believed that he needed to try and mediate the situation, and then all of a sudden, a shot rang out. Cham was clipped in the shoulder, but he was okay, as 2 guards came out to protect him. Obi-Wan turned around and looked through the crowd of people, which began to get rowdy, trying to protect the guy that was running away after shooting Cham Syndulla. Obi-Wan spun around some of the hecklers before raising his fists to defend himself. They surrounded him. They each tried to take on Kenobi at the same time, as he flung his boot into one of their faces and defended himself with a quick duck and weave, as he put the other two men on their backs. Kenobi then pulled the last man, who swung at him very heavily. Kenobi threw the man into the guy behind him. Obi-Wan looked over and saw the man who took the shot running away from the scene. Obi-Wan ran as his robes flapped in the wind behind him. Obi-Wan picked up his speed as he darted around the corner and saw a starship taking off. Obi-Wan reached out as he tried to pull the ship from going away, as a force latched onto the ship. Obi-Wan grabbed a tracker from his pocket and threw it at the ship as it started to slip from his grip. Obi-Wan released the ship as he ran to his Jedi starfighter with the tracker nailed onto the other ship. He jumped into the cockpit of his starfighter and took off after the ship of the man that was trying to escape. The ship was quick as the pilot decided to go into a backwater world, taking into hyperspace. Obi-Wan followed suit as he tried to decide what he would do next. If he captured him, which was inevitable, how would he transport him back to Ryloth? Unless Cham was able to come and pick him up. Yeah, that would work. Obi-Wan called Cham on his communications device, firstly to check in to make sure he was alright, but then to also let him know that the man was heading towards Tatooine as it seemed on the hyperspace route. Cham would send his guard to pick up the traitor from Kenobi, who was going after the man. As Obi-Wan exited hyperspace, he saw the starfighter. Kenobi focused in as he boosted his Jedi starfighter after him. The Twi'lek boosted down into some massive canyons after going into the atmosphere, and through the incredible dune seas of Tatooine. Obi-Wan followed closely as he looked for the right shot to take to get this guy to land. As he swung his starfighter around the corner, he shot at the engines and blasted one of them out of commission. Obi-Wan swung his starfighter around as the Twi'lek's engine began to fail, and the ship began to barrel down to the surface of the planet, outside of a large city. The ship crashed without scarring the city. Obi-Wan jumped from his starfighter and allowed his astromech to pilot the ship down to the surface. Obi-Wan landed behind the man and told him to stop. The man whipped around his pistol and shot at Obi-Wan, as Kenobi rolled around and ignited his lightsaber, blocking the shots away from the Twi'lek assassin. Obi-Wan then reached out his hand with the Force, freezing the man in place as he waited for Cham Syndulla's guard to arrive. Within 20 minutes or so, they were here, and they took the man into custody, as they thanked Obi-Wan for taking care of the issue. Obi-Wan smiled and walked into town. There was a landing bay that his droid had taken the ship to, because the starfighter needed to refuel. Inside of a small depot, Obi-Wan met an older man by the name of Labul Moto. He had a young daughter who was running around the bay. The man said that the ship needed some time to fuel up, so he might as well enjoy the city of Mos Espa while he was here. Obi-Wan nodded as he told the droid to get back to the Jedi Temple, and inform them of the situation on Ryloth and tell them that had been dealt with. Obi-Wan turned around and walked out into the streets of Mos Espa. He started walking around as he looked for a cantina to get a refreshment from. As he walked down the streets, he stopped in the middle of the street. He felt a disturbance in the force. There was a woman in all gray walking down the street adjacent to him. She was carrying a small child. Obi-Wan paused for a moment and looked at her. There was something off, so he walked up to her and asked for her name. She said that she was Shmi Skywalker. Obi-Wan asked if she was Force sensitive. She shook her head because she didn't understand what he meant by that. Obi-Wan said that the Jedi used the Force, and that the Force existed within every living being, but he was drawn over here for no reason. There had to be a reason why. Obi-Wan looked at the child who was in her arms. Obi-Wan looked back at Shmi and asked if he had any special abilities. Shmi nodded and asked that Obi-Wan come back to her residence with her. When they got to the residence, Shmi started telling Obi-Wan about her child. She said that when Anakin was an infant, he would levitate objects with his mind, and with his hands. Sometimes it was as small as a cup, and other times it could be as large as a table. Obi-Wan covered his mouth. He asked if he could take a blood sample, so that he could have it analyzed, and then he would come back. Shmi nodded with a little bit of concern on her face. Obi-Wan said it wasn't bad or a big deal, but if the child was indeed Force sensitive, he would be brought back to the Jedi Temple so that he could be trained in the ways of the Force. Of course, that would have to be with Shmi's permission. Shmi was able to connect the dots and realize that Obi-Wan was a Jedi, and so she agreed. It was seen as a great respect that children be taken to the Jedi Order. Out here especially, parents would welcome the opportunity to get their child off of a scum-filled world like Tatooine. Within hours, Obi-Wan would be back from his starfighter, and he would tell her that Anakin was indeed Force sensitive. Obi-Wan, during their time before he got the blood scan, found out that Shmi was a slave. So, Obi-Wan told her that he would free her from slavery, and he would take Anakin back to the temple with her permission. Shmi would agree to both terms, excited that her boy would have the opportunity to help others. Obi-Wan also informed Shmi that he would talk to the Jedi Council about the slavery issue out here in the Outer Rim, especially because it was an issue that should have been stopped by the Republic long ago. After a little while, Obi-Wan would carry young Skywalker back with him to his ship, and in a matter of hours, the two of them would be back at the Jedi Temple. Obi-Wan went to the top of the Jedi Temple and interact with the High Council. Obi-Wan firstly would tell the Council about this child he found, telling them that this was the boy Anakin Skywalker, and he had a higher midichlorian count than Master Yoda. The Council was all in shock about this revelation. They would accept Anakin into the Order with open arms. Because Anakin was still so young, there was no issue with him being allowed into the Order, especially since Anakin had very little emotional attachments. The Jedi would have a much easier time teaching him the Jedi Code. Once the topic was covered, Obi-Wan wanted to talk to the Council about the slavery issue in the Outer Rim. The Council was a bit taken aback by that. They didn't realize that there was slavery anywhere in the galaxy. Obi-Wan asked if he could lead a Jedi movement into the Outer Rim. The Council would approve of this motion by Obi-Wan, but they would suggest that an experienced master go out into the Outer Rim with him. Master Dooku would be sent with Obi-Wan out into the Outer Rim for the next couple of years. Dooku and Obi-Wan would have intense interactions with the Hutts, Zygerians, and even the Pikes. All of these crime families would not take too kindly to the Jedi being present in the Outer Rim. Because of the Jedi being present in the Outer Rim, creating a commotion with these families, the Republic would be brought into the Outer Rim and put an end to the slave empire that was being built. As the next 2 years became very stressful for the two Jedi, they would establish a very tight friendship. Not that they weren't friends already. Obi-Wan and Dooku were really friendly before, but having an assignment together for such an elongated period of time meant that they would have to rely on each other, and this reliance on one another made them trust each other with their lives. At this point, Obi-Wan had grown out his beard, and he was 20 years old, though it was time for them to return to the Jedi Temple. Their mission was mostly successful for the two Jedi. Over the past 2 years, they were able to rid almost every little bit of slavery in the Outer Rim. And with Chancellor Valorum cracking down on the issues in the Outer Rim, the public view of him was overly positive, because of his strong resolve against slavery in the galaxy. When Obi-Wan returned to the Jedi Temple, he separated from Dooku, and was approached by another Jedi Master, that one being Sindralik. The Jedi Master asked if Obi-Wan had returned to pick an apprentice. Obi-Wan was a bit confused because he had just finished a 2-year mission. Sindralik suggested that he take a look at the youngling class. There might be a youngling that he might want to train. Obi-Wan said that he would consider it, since he had been longing to teach a student of his own for the first time in his young career. There was no reason for Obi-Wan not to give it a shot. After all, he thought he would train young Skywalker in a little while, so having a student before Anakin would be worth his time. Obi-Wan looked over the class and then decided that he would take a student of his own, if she was still able to be taught. There were a couple days until the students were taken by their teachers, so, up until that day, Obi-Wan would consult his master for guidance before he would return to the selection of a Jedi Padawan. Obi-Wan would stand just where his master stood, just 9 years beforehand. When it was time for Obi-Wan to select his student, he picked a young Jedi, who was the same age he was when he was first selected. She was a young Twi'lek by the name of Aayla Secura. She was excited to be one of the first students selected, as she scurried over to meet her new teacher. Aayla looked up at the taller man. He had longer hair, with a very tightly, nicely trimmed beard. Obi-Wan placed his hand on her shoulder and guided her towards the training rooms nearby. Obi-Wan was going to rehash everything he was taught when he was a young Padawan. There was a lot to unpack about this young Jedi. Obi-Wan had to learn about her and what it was that she wanted to do with her skills as a Jedi. Aayla was light on her feet, but she seemed to be more attracted towards a more aggressive lightsaber form. At this point, Aayla was only 12, so there was a good chance that she could find interest in another lightsaber form. But for now, it was evident that Obi-Wan had a lot of instructing to do. Because of his teacher having been Mace Windu, he took on teaching Aayla quickly and naturally. Obi-Wan was prepared for this, and he was ready to do this. Everything Mace had done in his training and the past 2 years with Master Dooku prepared him for this moment. Obi-Wan ignited his lightsaber as he told Aayla to prepare herself. Much like Obi-Wan 9 years before, she moved into the basic Form 1 position. Obi-Wan then moved his blade delicately, being a bit more gentle than his master was with him previously, as he pushed her back. Ayla took an upper hand that lasted momentarily, until Obi-Wan seized it back, throwing her off of her feet. Obi-Wan reached down and helped up Ayla. He knelt down to get down to her level. He told her to always remember to get back up. The beginning of their training would see her on her back a lot. And, while it might be disorienting or even break her motivation, Obi-Wan smiled and told her to let it embolden her motivation. Ayla smiled. Obi-Wan stood back up and told her that he wasn't going to go easy on her. Ayla smiled as she spun her lightsaber in her hands and swung it at her new master. Obi-Wan jumped up and used the Force to stop the blade in midair. He pushed it away as she spun around and swung from the other side, as Obi-Wan ignited his lightsaber and blocked her. Obi-Wan, in 3 moves, would put her back on her backside again. Obi-Wan, round after round, would do the same thing. Ayla, after every round, would get back up with the biggest smile on her face. Obi-Wan knew he had the right apprentice. She was a formidable student, thus far, and it only meant that she would grow in her strength as a Jedi. Much like the training of Obi-Wan did with Mace, Kenobi trained Ayla, and it would work their way through the different lightsaber forms that would lead her to be an efficient user of Form 5. Days would turn to weeks and soon into months. It was a remarkable transformation that Ayla undertook. Much like her master, she wasn't exactly efficient in Form 1, and so when she began to expand her field of vision, she was able to excel. It also helped that Kenobi was becoming more and more of a powerful Jedi within the Order. Within the next 6 months, Ayla would finally be taken out on her first mission outside of the Jedi Temple. Over the next 4 years, the two Jedi would grow closer in their bond with one another. Master and apprentice consistently had each other's backs, and Ayla took after her master quite well, though their bond would be trusted when they were sent to the peaceful world of Naboo, aboard of a diplomatic vessel. Obi-Wan and Ayla Secura were here to ensure that there would be no invasion of Naboo. These two Jedi were representing the Republic, and with that representation, they needed to ensure that the Trade Federation didn't just invade the peaceful planet. While there were hints that the galaxy was coming close to an all-out conflict over taxation disputes, Chancellor Valorum still had a power threshold on the Senate because of his accomplishments in the past 6 years regarding the abolishment of slavery. When the two Jedi arrived, they were brought into a conference room so that they could cease the possibility of a hostile action taken by the Trade Federation. They waited patiently as the master and apprentice talked with one another, before gasps started to fill their room. Obi-Wan nodded at his apprentice as the two of them covered their faces, and within moments the room was swarmed with B-1 battle droids, and were armed ready to kill the diplomats. The battle droids were unprepared when 2 blue lightsabers ignited and cut through their ranks with delicate ease. Obi-Wan then looked ahead as the two of them began to run towards the command deck. They came around the corner as the Nemodians on the inside of the bridge closed the blast door. Obi-Wan looked at his apprentice as the two of them began cutting through the door on opposite ends. Then, 2 battle droids came running down the hallways as they both took their shot. Obi-Wan turned around as he stopped the blasts in the middle of the air and sent them back towards the ones who shot them. Obi-Wan then continued and turned around as the blast doors sealed again, a second layer of protection for those inside of the bridge. Obi-Wan and Ayla got next to each other as they both pointed their blades for the middle of the door and shoved their lightsabers into the middle. This created waves of heat as their blades began to destroy the doors. Rolling could be heard and echoing through the hallways. Ayla looked at her master as he told her to keep pressing into the door. The door then shattered open, revealing the command deck. Obi-Wan and Ayla turned around as 2 destroyer droids burned through the hallways at 10 speeds. Ayla said that she would get the Nemodians, and her master smiled at her as he turned around to protect his apprentice from the destroyers. Ayla ran into the room as she ignited her lightsaber and told everyone on the deck to put their hands in the air. Kenobi on the outside could be heard defending himself as blaster bolts bounced off of his lightsaber, as he used Form 4 to defend himself from every shot. Ayla raised her blade towards the leader inside of the room, named Nute Gunray, as she told him to turn off the destroyer droids. He refused, as Ayla got closer and told him to do it now. Gunray, who was very little experienced with interactions with Jedi, panicked. Like a coward he was, he told the other Nemodians behind him to turn off all the battle droids in the control ship. Obi-Wan could be heard turning off his lightsaber as he stepped through the rubble that he and his apprentice made in the doorway. Obi-Wan looked at his apprentice and smiled at her as she stepped back and sheathed their lightsaber. Obi-Wan praised her for her work as she stood beside her master. Obi-Wan then began to be the negotiator as he told Nute Gunray that it was time for the Trade Federation to learn a lesson in diplomacy. Gunray tried talking his way out of the situation, but blockading the entire planet of Naboo because of a tax issue that didn't involve the planet was a bit out of line. Gunray stuttered as the Nemodian next to him shook his head. Obi-Wan smiled as he told Gunray that it was time to contact the Republic and make a deal with Chancellor Valorum. Newt again tried to talk his way out of the situation as he tried explaining that Valorum was power-hungry and corrupt, but Ayla and Kenobi didn't buy it. Ayla then spoke up, telling Gunray that if he had any self-respect, he should consider talking to the Chancellor before he spends a lifetime in prison. Obi-Wan was so proud of his student. She had come so far, being so quiet and reserved to outspoken and righteous. While Kenobi and Sakura never encountered a Sith, the Sith would continue to stay off the radar for the Jedi Order. Without having to worry about the Republic, the Jedi would continue to distance themselves from the Galactic Republic, and Master Dooku would eventually join the ranks of the High Council after reclaiming some faith in the Order itself. The tension that was inside of the Galactic Senate was resolved without a vote of no confidence. Chancellor Valorum would secure his power by getting rid of lobbyists and allowing the Senate to serve without greed or anything else of that sort. Though the Sith still existed, but their grand plan had just been foiled. This would be most troublesome for a Sith by the name of Sidious. He was a student to Plagueis, and because he had no chance to enact on his plans, he was stuck being an apprentice to Plagueis for good, until he could secure himself power in the galaxy. There was also the slight issue of having a student by the name of Maul. Because Maul was only meant to be an assassin, it could be difficult for Palpatine to continuously play off the training of his own apprentice, especially because the Sith were known for their infighting and only having supposed to have a master and apprentice. Though Plagueis wasn't exactly the type of Sith to be overzealous. He was a studious Force user, and that's what he cared about most, was his study of the Force. There was also the slight inconvenience for Palpatine inside of the Senate, and that was the rising politician by the name of Bail Organa. He was becoming more and more popular within the Senate, and he might prove to be an issue for the Senator of Naboo if it came time for Valorum to be removed from power. As of right now, there was little to no chance that would happen, because he was currently responsible for removing slavery from the galaxy, and he was also responsible for stopping the Trade Federation from creating tension. And because Valorum was able to understand the issue, he resolved the issue. And then there was the tension that was so prevalent in the galaxy that was removed by his guidance and diplomacy. Obi-Wan and his student would continue to traverse the galaxy, helping people and saving others. Their bond was tighter than ever before, but they both knew that the time was coming for them to part ways as master and apprentice. Of course, they would always be there for one another, but it was time for Ayla to begin her own journey. After 7 years of training with her master, she and 29 BBY would begin her journey as a Jedi Knight. Obi-Wan was ecstatic to see her grow into her own and finally become her own Jedi in the Order. For Obi-Wan, the pleasantries were not over when he was approached by his master. Kenobi was a little intrigued, but when he was asked if he would like to join the High Council, he was blown away. Of course Obi-Wan would be willing to join the High Council. For Mace, it meant that he would have the perfect track record when it came to bringing students into the High Council. At first, Depa, and second, Kenobi. Obi-Wan's seat would be next to Dooku's. At this point, Obi-Wan would be offered the chance to train the child he brought into the Jedi Temple 9 years beforehand. Anakin Skywalker was now the same age as Ayla was when he took her under his wing. Anakin was an impressive student. He was a good listener, increasingly patient, and incredibly powerful. Of course, he was the Jedi's chosen one, but the opportunity to train the child was up to Obi-Wan. Being a new student and a new seat on the council, he assumed he might as well take on the student. It couldn't hurt. While it could be easy to say no, Obi-Wan assumed that because of how much he enjoyed being a teacher to Ayla, that he would enjoy training Anakin. Obi-Wan was given the first selection over the student because he was a council member and because he brought Skywalker to the temple himself. So, Obi-Wan was fully ready to teach again, taking Anakin under his wing and beginning his training, just like it was done before. Much like the training of Ayla, Anakin was taught through the different lightsaber forms, especially considering that Anakin wanted to be and learn how to use Form 5 as well. Obi-Wan would inquire Ayla several times, and have her work with Anakin as well. Obi-Wan kept a tight bond with all of his students, and as he was a council member, he was revered across the temple. Kenobi at this point, as well, was a master of Form 7, and he was also very masterful with Form 5, 2, and 3. Because of his own training with Aayla Secura, he got more proficient in the corresponding lightsaber forms. Oddly enough, as Obi-Wan was taught by Mace in the more aggressive forms, his students followed suit with his teachings, and even more so did Obi-Wan. For Anakin, his progression would be much quicker than Aayla's, to no fault of her own. Anakin's midichlorian count, alongside of the teachings of an experienced master, allowed him to flourish exponentially. Anakin was humble in his own respect, and he was growing at an exceptional rate. He progressed through the training faster than Kenobi or Aayla ever did, and it meant that it was time for Anakin to go out into his first missions off-world as a Jedi Padawan. At this point, Anakin, in his life, he had no emotional attachments, and he had a great level of respect and fondness for his master and the Order itself. He was also inspired to be like his master because of the amount of respect that Obi-Wan had within the Order. Anakin and Obi-Wan would continue their missions across the galaxy for the corresponding years. 4 years would again pass by, as they would take a short mission to Dantooine to resolve a border dispute of sorts. When the two arrived, they would find a disturbance in the Force. While they would pass it off as the tension on the planet, they would soon find that it was not at all the case. As the two Jedi arrived in the city, Anakin pointed out a shadow passing through alleyways. Obi-Wan didn't pick up on it though. Anakin at this point was 16, as he stared down at someone that was running through the alleyways, and he followed, as he looked for the dark shadow that passed through. Obi-Wan followed his apprentice as a blue lightsaber ignited. Anakin looked at a hooded man, as he demanded him to turn around. The entire capital city was currently on curfew, because they needed to keep the peace, while there was a border dispute. Anakin thought it was weird seeing someone running about. The man turned around and looked at the two Jedi, as he removed his hood. Obi-Wan and Anakin looked at the piercing yellow eyes of a red Zabrak. Kenobi ignited his lightsaber and stood side by side with Anakin. The two Jedi paced around as Maul ignited his double-bladed lightsaber. Anakin in his maturity knew not to overstep his boundaries, as Maul swung forward trying to cut through the two Jedi. Obi-Wan blocked and defended against Maul, as Anakin tried to help his master in the duel. Maul used his double-bladed lightsaber to defend against both Jedi, at the same time as he used his incredible acrobatics to escape tight situations. Maul, who was cornered, knew he had to escape this predicament, as he tried to find a way out. Anakin and Kenobi were superior duelists, as the two of them beat down on Maul, offering him a chance to surrender. When Maul refused the offer, as he swung at Kenobi, the clashing blades of the Jedi and the Sith continued. Anakin took advantage of this moment as he swung down, cutting Maul's leg as he swung his blade around and cutting through the Sith Lord, killing him instantaneously. Obi-Wan and Anakin looked at each other. Maul was dead, but it was more than evident that one thing was true. The Sith had returned. Obi-Wan told Anakin that he would deal with the border dispute here, but Anakin needed to return to the Jedi Temple and alert them what had just happened, and alert them that the Sith had just returned. And so, it was done. Anakin left in the shuttle with a dead Maul in tow, as he returned to Coruscant to discuss the recent revelation. The border dispute would be another cakewalk for the negotiator himself, as he hitched a ride back to Coruscant to confront the Council. Anakin had displayed the lightsaber of the Sith Lord, and told the Council that he and Kenobi offered the Sith a chance to surrender, but subsequently he was killed because of his inability to do so. The Council thanked Anakin for revealing the truth to him. By this time, Obi-Wan had returned to the Council and was discussing what they should do in regards to discovering the Sith. The Council thought momentarily. Obi-Wan said that they should try and find the surge of darkness in the galaxy. While there was very little evil that was within the Senate, the Jedi needed to find the evil Sith and ensure that they never returned into the power of the galaxy. The Council decided that they would split up into groups of 2. It would be the best for all of them. They would scourge the galaxy to try and find a threat and eradicate it. While some of the council members like Ki-Adi-Mundi would be very against this, with Kenobi and Dooku on the council, they would be able to convince the Jedi Masters that it would be for the best of their decisions. The Jedi would travel with either another council member or their former student to one of the ancient homeworlds of the Sith to see if they could discover the evil Sith and destroy them. Kenobi would go with Aayla Secura and Anakin Skywalker to one of several Outer Rim worlds. Much like many of the Jedi Masters, they would dispatch themselves into the Outer Rim as they would search for the Sith remnant. On the surface of Coruscant, 3 Jedi Masters would go down into the deepest depths of the Jedi Temple, where there was an evil hidden below, an evil Sith temple. Yoda, Dooku, and Windu would all take their time as they paced down through the ancient corridors of the Jedi Temple into the evil, darkened halls of the Sith Temple. The Jedi were looking for any sign that their evil rival had returned. As the three masters knelt on the ground, they felt the Force flow through them as they searched for answers. All three of them had a vision. Each one of their visions were different, but all occurring on Coruscant. One vision was of an evil senator from a blue and green world. The second vision was one of a tall, cloaked being on the inside of a laboratory, with a city view that showed the Jedi Temple in the background. And the final vision was of two beings in a heated dispute as they fought on a balcony in Coruscant. As the three Jedi confronted each other about their visions, they realized that the Sith were not off-world. While it would take time to get all the Jedi back to Coruscant, Grandmaster Yoda requested that all council members return. At the same time, the Jedi would go out into the cityscope and look for the same view that they saw in their vision. The three Jedi Masters found transport so that they could go across the city looking for that same view they had in their visions. Buzzing through the city streets, they felt the Force be offset. They were getting close. As Obi-Wan's shuttle passed through the city with Anakin and Ayla on board, they hadn't left the planet yet, and they were hovering outside of the atmosphere before they were giving orders to return to Coruscant. As they coasted through the city, they saw a window break and two red lightsabers clashing with one another on a balcony. Obi-Wan told Ayla to contact the Jedi Council and inform them that the Sith were at these coordinates. Obi-Wan and Anakin pulled the ship over to the top of the building as the three Jedi piled out. They all ran down into the building as they chased the sounds of lightsabers echoing through the hallways. As Obi-Wan ran in first, the three Jedi ignited their lightsabers and steadily walked into the Sith residence. The Sith, who were locked in a heated exchange of combat, turned around when they felt the Force change direction. The Sith jumped through the window as they looked at the three Jedi. On the balcony, three more Jedi jumped in behind the two Sith. They were surrounded, outmatched 6-2. The Sith took each other's backs as they lunged at the group of Jedi. Sidious took on Windu, Dooku, and Yoda, as Plagueis took on Kenobi and his two prize students. The heated exchange lit up the room. As Kenobi pushed Plagueis back with his offensive lightsaber combat, Anakin and Ayla ran over from both sides of Kenobi as they both slashed at the Sith Lord. Plagueis was a talented duelist, but this was too much even for him. As he tried to defend himself from both Jedi, he was cut down immediately by Ayla Secura. Anakin continued running forward as Sidious dug his blade forward, trying to clip Dooku, who defended himself with ease. Windu went on the offensive as Sidious's second blade defended against the attack. Anakin ran forward as he dug his blade through the back of Sidious, killing the Sith Lord. The six Jedi all looked at each other. They had to look into what the Sith were doing here. And while they had to try and discover what the Sith had been up to, the truth was that the Sith were fighting each other because Palpatine had an apprentice, and Plagueis didn't like that. With the Sith gone, the Jedi were able to continue to establish peace in the galaxy, as the galaxy would find itself in a peace-filled regime for the rest of time. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to George Story, Benjamin Wells, Jay Hoffman, Warpigman 308, Icy Raptor, Gort, Chancellor Lauren Sanders for supporting the channel. Let's hit down the links on this so we can see what if Luke turned Vader before fighting Sidious. If you want to see a what if, let me know down below. If you have comments on YouTube crossovers, check out the Twitch, Discord, and community Patreon. If you want to be part of our community, support me in other ways. And if you want to learn how to win a free Sideshow collectible, we're doing this giveaway. It is going until July 31st of 2022, and that is at 11:59 p.m. So we have to hit 35,000 subscribers by that time. We're closing in. I think we can do it. We've got about 11 days, 12 days until the end of 13 days until the end of July. So I believe we can do it, but you guys need to help me out. Share the video, subscribe to all the things, and I will be giving away one of these Sideshow collectibles. To enter the giveaway, go down below. There's a pinned comment. You click on the pinned comment, you put your name on the giveaway. I will add all the names once they are added. And let's talk about our story. I really like this story. This might be one of my new favorites, if I'm going to be completely honest and modest about this. I really liked how this story turned out. I really didn't know where I was going to go with this originally, because there's always a question of what happens with Anakin, right? And I wanted Anakin to be found by accident. That's just how it came out. But I think people are going to have a discrepancy with this, and I know why, and that's because of Obi-Wan's power. And I'm not saying that Qui-Gon was a bad teacher, right? We didn't know what Obi-Wan had within him until Kenobi came out. And I know, whatever, it's canon now, shut up. And the fact is that because of Kenobi's power threshold that we see in the show, we have so much more playing room. Okay, we see Obi-Wan peak in the show. That means there's so much more untapped potential within him, and I wanted to access that with this show, with this video, and that's what I did. we took Obi-Wan from the Jedi we all know him as Master Hello There, the Negotiator, this guy that's very talented in Form 3, but we give him this aggressive form, and we have him train with one of the most powerful duelists, one of the most prized duelists in the entire Jedi Order, and I think you get Obi-Wan Kenobi from the show. And I think that's what we got here, and I think that's what I was shooting for when I first started this, is that Obi-Wan was going to reach this same level that we see him reach in the show, because Obi-Wan showed us that he has more potential, more untapped potential within him, and because we get to see that for the first time in Obi-Wan Kenobi, I wanted to take that and bring it to, what if he did that before anything bad happened? What if he was able to access that power beforehand? And I think it worked relatively well. And while I know some people don't like the canon from Disney or don't see whatever, I don't really care. Honestly, I don't care. This is a Star Wars story for everyone, and I'm taking advantage of what we have and what we know. And I believe that having Mace Windu be this extravagant teacher, I mean, he trained Depa, and she became a council member right after he trained her. Like, if that says anything to you, that has to tell you that he's a good teacher, right? And he's a very young guy. He's not old. So that being passed on to Obi-Wan, I think, would be very efficient. Again, I'm not saying Qui-Gon's a bad teacher, I'm not saying Dooku's a bad teacher, I'm not saying Yoda's a bad teacher, because they were all taught by Yoda, essentially, if you go through the lineage of it. But Dooku's not a bad teacher for how he taught Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon's not a bad teacher for how he taught Obi-Wan in canon. And that's the thing. Qui-Gon's not a bad teacher. But I'm saying that Master Windu, Mace Windu, is on another level of teaching. He's another level of Jedi. He's one of the most powerful Jedi in the Order. And I know we say that a lot in some of these videos, but we do need to at least acknowledge that some of these Jedi are some of the most powerful Jedi we've ever seen. Plo Koon, Yoda, Windu, they're just incredible guys. And Obi-Wan gets added to that list because of what we've seen him do. And the one thing that I was trying to connect back to that is the interaction with the pirates on that one planet where they were pinned down. I wanted that to be your moment where, oh, that makes sense now. That's where he's going with that. And you might not get that. It's a very kind of thrown into the middle of the video kind of reference, and there's another reference like that to the woman from, I think her name is Pili Moto, that owns the gas station or the little docking yard in Mos Espa in Book of Boba Fett and The Mandalorian. I made a reference to her and gave her a father essentially, and put that in the video as well. And I hope you guys pick up on those little references. But the little reference to the Obi-Wan Kenobi show was picking up all the rocks and boulders, and that was Obi-Wan showing that he has reached the level that we see him reach when he's like 45, 46, 47, at the rightful age of like 18 or 17, right? And we see that he can achieve that power because that power is very much so a part of who he is and a part of what he can achieve as a Jedi and as a Force user. And that's what I wanted to touch upon, and I wanted to extrapolate on. As for going further, pairing Ayla and Obi-Wan up was a complete accident. I just kind of stumbled upon it and it worked perfectly, and I was like, this would be really cool. I never thought about putting the two of them together. I never even conceived the idea because, you know, they've got quite an age difference. And I was like, well, this actually could work because Obi-Wan was 25 when he was still a knight, right? Or when he was still a Padawan. So he doesn't become a knight until late into his life. So if he becomes a teacher at the age of 20, I think he could very much so take on Ayla as his apprentice. And if she's trained in 7 years or 9 years or whatever it was, I believe that Anakin could become his next apprentice. But I wanted Obi-Wan to have his first apprentice before he had Anakin. And that was intended when I kind of first started getting the idea down for what I wanted to do with the story. The only thing is, I didn't expect it to be Ayla Secura. But I thought having Ayla Secura would be nice, having that nice character, because Ayla is such a strong character, and she comes from being a slave like Anakin. And I thought that having Obi-Wan not only spend 2 years with Dooku out in the Outer Rim trying to get rid of slavery, but also train 2 children that were originally slaves was kind of cool and kind of wholesome moment. The only thing that's very sad for me personally is that Obi-Wan never gets to interact with Satine, and that's always tragic because I adore Satine as much as you guys loathe that. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this story. This story was a lot of fun. This is honestly one of the more fun stories I've done, and I've enjoyed telling the story so much because it was so much fun to tell. It was so enjoyable. It was remarkable for me to tell it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did telling it. Other than that though, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Let's hit that 35,000 and let's hit 50,000 as well. Let's go for all of it. Let's go for all the big buttons, right? Anyways, I love you all. Spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.